Good evening, everyone. This is Fred Finley. I'm the chairman of the Finance Committee. This is March the 4th, 2021, and this meeting is called to order. A roll call, Vice Chair Tao, Commissioners Choi.
Here.
Elsner.
Here.
Wood.
Here.
And our City Treasurer, Pia.
I'm here.
Okay. Our council liaison, welcome Council Member Jack Donovan.
Thank you. I'm here.
And our staff member, our interim assistant city manager, Elaine Aguilar, and two members of the finance department, our finance manager, Albert Tan, and the accounting manager, Armani.
Hi.
Are there any public comments?
None were received or recorded. No written comments and no recorded comments, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. The first item on our agenda tonight is the fiscal year 2021 budget and CIP. Ms. Aguilar, can you bring us through that, please?
I sure can. Before we get started, just a few preliminary things. Staff is very pleased to be bringing this forward this evening. As you know, it's been a very, very unusual, to say the least, year. Normally, this document would be approved before July 1st. The city's fiscal year is July 1st to June 30th. Here we are now in March. Bring it forward to you based on direction from the commission, then went to the city council requesting that we wait until the 2019 audit was complete. And so as you're all aware, we completed our 2019 audit, and I'm also pleased to report that the 2020 audit has begun. The auditors have begun working on that. They're doing some pre-auditing review and tests, and will actually be completely immersed in the audit in a week. So that's also moving along, the 2020 audit. But I prepared just a few slides presentation, PowerPoint, which I will bring up just as a way to organize my thoughts as we go through this. As you're aware, it's a very voluminous document, and I tried to pick up, this is at a high level, definitely the 30,000 foot level, but staff is prepared to delve into this and any level of detail that the commission would want, if there's particular line items, for example. But I think this will give you just a general overview of how we got here this evening, what staff has done to prepare this document, and then what our numbers actually look like. It's very different, I'll tell you. I know you've read your staff report than what was originally envisioned for this fiscal year. If we were looking at this a year ago versus today, things have changed quite a bit. So without further ado, the second slide. We waited, as you're aware, for the completion of the 2019 CAFR. The information, all the information from the 2019 CAFR, our final audited numbers, were used to prepare the document before you. Actual fund balances tied to our audit, actual expenditures tied to our audit. In addition, given the amount of time that's lapsed in putting this budget together, we were also able to have even better numbers for fiscal year 2020, the year that just ended in June. Normally, as you can imagine, think of the timing when staff under normal situations is bringing the budget forward to the commission and the council. It's using numbers, an estimate maybe based through April or May for expenditures for a budget to be adopted effective July 1st. In this case, because June 2020 is behind us and staff has been worked diligently getting ready for the 2020 audit, we were actually able to use pre-audit numbers for all the revenue and expenditure estimates for fiscal year 2020, which in the budget will fall under the estimated 2020 budget column whenever you're going through the document. So I wanted you to be aware that the estimated 2020 budget numbers are unaudited numbers. They're better numbers than if we were dealing with numbers, for example, that didn't include the whole fiscal year, but there will be some audit adjustments. The auditors will reclassify things, think things belong in fiscal year 21, maybe take some things from fiscal year 21 because they belong in 2020. So there will be some adjustments, but I wanted to assure you that these are really good numbers. Then Albert and I met with the departments and reviewed the expenditures. It's almost like this is more of a mid-year budget review than an actual proposed budget, because we were able to use actual expenditures for a little bit more than half the year. It says July to January, but really we did another review just to see what February looked like to develop the estimated expenditures for the current fiscal year. So we sort of have that benefit of 2020 hindsight. We've got solid data also for the first half of the fiscal year. And then we also were able to do the same thing with the revenues. We were able to review the revenues actually received between July to January to develop our estimated revenues. Go to the next page. And if you have any questions, please feel free to just speak up as we go through this. You don't need to wait to the end. Why is this a draft? We will take the proposed budget to the City Council after the Commission has completed your review. You'll notice we call this a draft proposed budget. There are a few missing pages. I wanted to be upfront, and you probably noticed we still don't have a table of contents, the part-time position summary, and the position distribution by funding source, and the GAN limit calculation. The table of contents is at the beginning of the budget document. Those other three items are supplementary information that are at the very end of the budget document. We just weren't able to get that done. It was important to us to get this document out to the public and to you on Monday, to give you Monday through Thursday to be able to review it. So we didn't want to hold up producing it. But when this goes to the City Council, those things will be added. And we'll make sure that we send you a link to the document so you can see the final one with these few things missing. There's also going to be last minute corrections, revisions. The first two items pertain to mistakes that were just made for the water in the water department. We forgot to include 2 purchases of granular activated carbon for our water well. So that line item, when the next draft of the budget goes out, instead of saying 110,000 in that line item, it'll be a $415,000 line item, which will only affect the water fund. That won't affect our general fund or our projected surplus or deficit for the fiscal year. Fire department, this one will affect the general fund. There was just a mistake with all the numbers where around 34,000 was put into this particular line item instead of $65,000. We do want to make that correction so that the department has the funds they need for that line item this fiscal year. At this point in time, those are the only 2 numerical things that we are aware of that will change between what you're reviewing tonight and what will go to the City Council. If there's anything at all added to this list, I will. Albert and I are going to be spending the weekend going through it one more time to make sure everything is as good as it can be. So if this list grows, we'll make sure that the commissioners, you're informed of what the changes are. And then there's some small typographical errors. I noticed 2 today. And they truly are typographical errors. The budget has a line item total, and then you can look at the narrative description to see what's in that line item. In some cases, the line item's correct, but the description, the amount of the description is incorrect. So it doesn't change the budget numbers, just the description needs to match what's in the line item. There were 2 of those.
The actual description is what's incorrect, or the number that goes with the description?
The description is incorrect.
Just
the number is correct.
Okay,
right.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of them is in the police department, and I saw another one this morning. I can even, if you're interested, when we get through this, I can even show you so you can see what I mean. But the number in the budget is correct, just the narrative description is incorrect. So that's just the dollar amounts for either revenues or expenditures. I don't anticipate we'll find anything else out, but if we do, I'll make sure that you're aware of what the changes are. Next one. Seems a little bit out of order, but I wanted to chat just briefly about what we're going to be doing. We're going to go straight from the City Council, hopefully approving this budget. We'll have an approved budget for the current fiscal year. And then we're going to jump immediately, staff is, into starting the fiscal year 2022 budget. So it will be on time. Normally cities do start on this come March. At March, April, May is when they're working on the budget documents to be able to present them in the month of June. So everything's adopted by July 1st. So this budget document will get the city back on schedule for budget preparation being done in a timely manner. The financial policies, again, just for transparency, staff fully admits that the financial policies, which are at the very beginning of the budget document, those need to be updated. They need to be modernized. They need to be updated. They need to have additional controls put in place. And it just, with the amount of time we had to put this document together, there were not significant differences in the financial policies between what's in 2021 and previous years. The only thing we did make sure, I want to make sure that we do return to preparing quarterly financial reports. And you'll notice in the draft policy that's in the budget document, it does actually state that we're going to do a quarterly financial report. And since we're only one quarter left in the fiscal year, that'll mean one quarterly financial report that will come out in May or June. So you can look forward to seeing that. We'll make sure that the commission, I'm not sure about the timing. I want to get it timely to the council, but in any case, we'll figure out how to make sure the commission sees it and the council, and the commission also sees it in addition to the council. Timing for 2022, we do plan to turn around immediately at the first meeting in April to have an initial discussion with the city council regarding the budget process that they would like to use, the public input, if there's any early guidance that they'd like to give staff before we actually start crunching the numbers. Between April and May, that's when we're actually behind the scenes preparing the budget document, developing the revenue and the expenditure estimates, and putting the document together so that by late May, early June, we'll put it on the Finance Commission agenda, and then late May to mid to mid-June going to the City Council for their approval, so that approval can be achieved by January 30th. So the budget will be in place for July 1st. Next one. On to the actual numbers that are in the budget before you. This chart is in the city manager's budget message. It presents, I just realized I flip-flopped the charts. Go to the next one. Hopefully the next one. I put expenditures in there instead of revenues. They're both, I apologize. I realize they're both expenditures. I meant to give a summary of revenues. We'll just chat about it. Total revenues for the city's budget. If you have your document in front of you, the revenues begin on page. Better yet, let's use the city manager's budget message is probably the best place because that's the chart I meant to use. On page 7, Albert, if you go to page 7 of the city manager's, thank you, budget message, there's the chart I meant to put into that other slide. General fund revenues, this chart shows our general fund revenues for our 2017 actual, 2018 actual, 2019 actual, the original budgeted amount for 2020, and then what we're estimating for fiscal year 2021. We list, this chart tends to list the top more significant. You can see these 5 revenue sources make up almost 90% of the city's total general fund revenues. The top one, of course, is property taxes. We do have a consultant who monitors this closely for the city. When a year ago, if we were discussing this with you a year ago, there was a lot of uncertainty regarding what the pandemic and people losing their jobs, what kind of impact that would have on property taxes. So far as you're aware, there hasn't been a significant wave. They're anticipating it will come of foreclosures and people not paying their property taxes. We've learned that most people actually pay their property taxes to an impound account. So if they've been making their regular monthly mortgage payment, their property taxes have been paid. So we have not so far seen a significant drop in our property taxes. In fact, we're anticipating they'll increase a little bit. I believe the overall increase is about 2.5% from the previous fiscal year off the top of my head. But I do want to mention just a cautionary tale for when we go into 2022. Prop 13 has those of you familiar with Prop 13, property taxes can only increase by 2% or the CPI. There have been a few times, I would have to say, since I'm old enough, since Prop 13 was put in place, I can recall on one hand how many times the 2% was the high number and the CPI was actually less than 2%. That is actually happening this year. So when we are presenting the fiscal year 2022 budget, you will see that we're not anticipating the full 2% 2% growth per Prop 13. It's actually coming in about half that. And again, it's in the law, it's in Prop 13. It's either what the CPI is or 2%. It's capped at the highest rate at 2%. So just some background information. Use of money and property. It's interesting. This fiscal year that popped up to number 2 on our list. Normally you can tell if you look at the previous fiscal year, it's nowhere near number 2. The reason that pops up to number 2 is a one-time payment for cell tower leases. Some of you may recall that a while ago in this fiscal year, the City Council reached an agreement with Tower Ventures to receive a lump sum payment all at once up front in lieu of receiving the annual cell tower lease payments. So this is a one-time payment. There's another slide that gives you the detail. It's about 4.3 million. There's a lump sum payment. City will not be receiving that again. In addition to which the city will not be receiving the annual, it was about $250,000 a year in cell phone payments. Those go away in lieu of this one-time payment.
How many years is this lease?
I will have to look that for you. I don't remember it off the top of my head. Maybe if Albert or maybe Armina, if you're in the background, you can look that up. Go on the city's website to look it up, and we'll get that information for you before we finish today's meeting. It's a long-term lease. It's at least 20 years. It's a long-term. So we'll get that for you because it was a agenda report, a staff report that went to the council. So we'll answer that before the meetings, before we remind us to go back to that. Or pipe up when you find it.
I was just curious how many more years before we can expect any type of payment again.
It's gonna be a long time. That for $4 million, it's gonna be a very long time.
Where is the cell tower?
There's a number of them. Believe it or not, I'm going again from memory. I want to say there's at least 8 to 12 locations all over town. They're in different places, parks, different places. So, you know what we'll do is just for information is the staff report was really very thorough. I'll just email it out just for background information because it's interesting. It has locations, amounts and everything. We'll email that out.
I'm kind of curious, what was the motivation behind trying to receive those payments up front rather than ongoing?
I wasn't here when the city did it. This happened before September. So I wasn't privy to what the discussions were at the city council level when this was brought to them. I can tell you that when most cities decide to do this, they actually do those of you who remember, financial analysis where they look at what the payback is and the stream of revenues, what those are worth if you bring them back to the present time. And in this situation, it made more financial sense to receive the money all up front than to wait for the stream of revenue. I had a conversation with one council member who has an interesting point, who knows whether or not it'll come to fruition or not, but technology is always changing. And who knows, at some point they may invent a technology where they no longer need cell towers for our cell phones, in which case this revenue would dry up. So it's just based on the unknown. You don't know what the future holds. And I know that a financial analysis was done that said this made more financial sense over this period of time. We'll send
Oh,
a
so the
report
so the
out.
future payments could have been variable anyway. So it
Right.
wasn't purely a timing element. It was timing and like knowing the amount. Okay.
Right, right. And some of the towers can be, you know, they can be discontinued, not being used. So this was a way to sort of lock in the revenue for a significant amount of money and receive the money now.
One final comment on that. So it sounds like the way we're booking the revenue is as a one-time revenue, or are we gonna book, use accrual accounting and kind of book it eventually over time?
Nope, it comes in as a one-time revenue.
Okay.
We book it when we receive it.
Okay.
We will not be spreading that out over future years, but I have a slide where we'll go a little bit more into this, but no, it'll be booked today as just one-time revenue, one lump sum.
Well, you say, I just have a question. You say one-time revenue, or is it going to the reserve fund? Where will it be going?
Yes, we have a slide that'll show you. It is sitting in the reserve fund.
Okay, thank you.
It will be sitting in the reserve fund. I won't get too far ahead, but until the council decides what to do with it.
Okay, thank you.
At this point in time, it's basically going to be sitting in reserves.
Okay.
The next category is sales taxes, and those should be somewhat familiar. We just discussed the most recent sales tax report with the commission at your last meeting. This is another area where a year ago, there was anticipation that sales taxes would significantly drop based on the stay-at-home orders. Instead, people switched to other ways to spend their money. As you recall from the presentation, online sales just surpassed anything they'd ever, their performance of any previous year, and just pretty much made up most of the revenue that was lost from, for example, our restaurant sector. So sales taxes did not experience that big decrease. People just spent their money on other things. Utility users taxes, you know what those are. Those are the fees that are on your water bill, electric bill, gas bill, cell phone bill that comes to the city. That is an area of revenue that I have to say between utility users tax, and we skipped over sales tax. It is worth mentioning. And the city manager did a very eloquent job of explaining in the budget message that it was truly the support from the South Pasadena voters and residents that our financial picture looks the way it does today. Because as you're aware, that property tax, the sales tax number, you see a big jump. In 2020, it was 2.4 million. Now we're estimating 4.7 million. I don't want to forget to mention that is entirely due to Measure A, which was a 0.75% sales tax increase that the voters approved. Additionally, for the utility user tax, as you're all aware, in November, the voters voted to continue that tax. So those two are important revenue sources to the city. And I can say single-handedly, those two things really did save the city from really serious financial problems this fiscal year.
I have a question on that line item.
Mhm.
When I look at the prior years, it's running about 2.5, 2.6 million, and we projected a 2.4 million in the budget, and we're running up to 4.8 million budget for the current year. Why do we have such an increase?
It's entirely due to about $2 million a year from Measure A on top of our regular sales taxes.
Okay.
Sean explains it in his summary.
Mhm.
Fred.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Current services, those are just all of the fees for planning fees, public works fees, recreation fees, all the things that are charged for fees for service. That's our fifth property, our fifth revenue on this chart. So when it's all said and done, total general fund revenues are estimated at 31.3 million, which is about 89% of our, I'm sorry, those top 5 revenue sources are 31.3 million. All of the other general fund revenue amounts to almost 4 million, for a total general fund revenue estimate this fiscal year of $35.3 million.
Elaine, do you know why the EUT was higher for 2020 versus the years before and years after?
UUT
The
for
3.485.
2020.
Yeah, because it seemed like it was on a slight downtrend and it just went up for that one year.
Yeah, we can dig. I don't know off the top of my head. I can dig into that and bring it to you at your next meeting. It's from a number of sources and I don't remember which ones. I can tell you for sure things like UUT from cable TV is dropping significantly because people are cutting the cord. So I know that is down significantly this year. I'll have to look. I can prepare a chart that shows the UUT from each of the utilities so we can see exactly which one is causing the numbers to do this. We can do that.
Well, I could kind of have a little input too. Since that column is budgeted numbers, the budget did not anticipate for COVID as well. This budget number was done, I believe, it was adopted on May of 2019. So we were unaware of COVID, so things looked a lot healthier. But also, even with the actuals, some of the UUTs actually went up because more people were staying at home. So higher electric usage and also higher water usage occurred.
That makes sense.
Fiscal year
And
2020.
we were anticipating it, as we've talked about it in the past. We were anticipating the UUT to go down. That was one of the reasons that Measure A was so important. Because people are cutting their phone lines and people are cutting cable.
Yeah, that's exactly why I thought it was odd that we were predicting 3.48 when probably the last number we had 3.345.
Right.
So we'll put, just as a discussion item on a future agenda, we'll just print a little chart and have a little discussion on it. I think it's worthwhile. And it'll be helpful because we are going to have to develop an estimate for fiscal year 2022. So digging a little deeper in that one, I think will be an interesting conversation.
I'm sure the council is going to be having similar questions about these.
Yes. So if you could go back to the chart, the PowerPoint, Albert, regarding expenditures now, the colorful chart, there we go. This chart looks at general fund expenditures for each of the city's departments. I always like to emphasize public works, even though public works looks like it's one of our smaller departments at 2.1 million. It actually is one of our larger departments because remember, this is just general fund. It doesn't include water and sewer and streets and trees and everything else. I'm sorry, streets, water, sewer, and streets aren't in this number. So this is just the general fund portion. I just like to point that out. These are just general fund expenditures, and we don't include any of the transfers. This is just purely just straight general fund expenditures. As normal, most city, I can tell you almost all city budgets will show that public safety is generally 50% or more of the general fund share of the budget. And in South Pasadena's case, it looks like it's 55%, adding those two together, the gray and the yellow. And then each of the other departments is shown in the pie chart and in the corresponding numbers of what the totals are. Finance, I would like to point out the finance, there's only 5 people in that department. So you're wondering how could it be $2.5 million? The finance department alone isn't a significant expense, but it's that non-departmental which is the details are shown in the budget document. That's where all of the sort of some overhead costs and things are included that are actually more than what the finance department costs. But it's always been this city's practice to put finance and the non-departmental budget together in one department, so to speak. And then you have police, fire, public works, planning, library, community services. Each of the departments in the budget, you'll be able to see what their staffing levels are. I should mention that in order to balance the budget this fiscal year, when COVID hit, there were reductions in staffing, particularly in areas where we were no longer going to be providing the service. Use community services, for an example. COVID hit, we weren't going to be doing the special events. We weren't going to be having all of the, as many recreational classes and activities. So for this fiscal year, I want to say community services is like about, oh, I have it in the notes. They're about $600,000 below what they normally would spend. And the library is about $300,000 below what they normally would spend, all because of COVID related impacts on their departments.
Elaine, you mentioned the non-departmental budget for the finance department, and I had a question about an item in there, and it was the utilities. Looking at pages 81 and 82, and there was a citywide water utility usage of about $450,000 that wasn't an item that appeared in past year's budget. So I'm wondering if you could shed some light on that.
I sure can. I would be happy to. The cities are required, believe it or not, to pay their own water bill. The way that South Pasadena had been doing it, or they did it last fiscal year, was through a fund transfer. So it's appropriate to do it that way. City can do it that way. So you can picture that as taking some of the general fund, when the budget's all done at the end of the year, transferring general fund money into the water fund. Unless you're digging into the audit and going into the detailed details, you're not going to be aware, and you're not going to be able to see what the city's water bill is for itself. So this was an effort to improve the document and improve the transparency and the understandability of it. So this year, instead of doing the fund transfer, behind the scenes fund transfer, the accounting transfer, instead we felt it's the same amount, it's the same impact on your bottom line in reducing your revenues, is to instead show it as a line item in the budget.
Thank you. I think that's a really positive thing to do, to get that out with its own item, and we can, watch that instead of not knowing what it is. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Elaine.
And it's not, sometimes you might even get a question, does the city pay its own water bill? Now you can say they definitely do, and there's a line item in the budget for it. Next slide. When you take all of the revenues and all the expenditures together, it's important to know what, at the end of the year, what we think our surplus or deficit will be. This chart shows the 35.3 million in revenues. The 1.4 million, the city council took action this fiscal year. I want to say it was around December, to pull $1.4 million out of reserves to be a match for the Rogan funds for the Fair Oaks interchange project. That the grant funds required the city council to identify a match. The match was 1.4 million, and the city council pulled that from reserves. So we need to pull that out of reserves. It becomes revenue. So it gives us a new higher revenue number of 36.7 million. Then we have our expenditures that we just covered, the 28.3 million. The transfers, the 3.8 million, that includes the 1.4 million plus the other city transfers for our total expenditures. So our year-end expenditures are estimated at 32.2. Yes, we acknowledge we're not going to be able to spend the 1.4 million this year. It will become a carryover. It'll either be a carryover project, or we'll show it in future audits as a designated reserve. We'll get direction from the council on how they want to deal with that, because it is going to be, I don't know what the estimate is from Public Works, but it's definitely not going to be spent this fiscal year. And we'll need to figure out, depending on the timing of the project, whether it sits in as a designated reserve or it gets put into the budget to actually spend it in the future year. So look, we'll highlight that when we prepare the 2022 budget, so you know what happened to that money. When it's all said and done, expenditures subtracted from the revenues, we anticipate a surplus of $4,462,000. This is where we were talking about earlier. That includes the one-time revenue from the South Tower master lease of $4,374,439. When you subtract that one-time revenue from the surplus, the adjusted surplus is, please accountants out there, it's a made-up term by Elaine. The adjusted surplus is actually $88,000. So that's about as close to balanced a budget as you can get. The city council is going to be considering how to use the one-time South Tower lease funds. At this point, I don't have any information for the commission on what they might decide to do with those funds. But we'll keep the commission in the loop, so you know when the item goes before the council, in case you're interested on what the city council decides to do with those monies.
Well, I know that there are many competing considerations. I would hope, Councilmember Donovan, I would hope that the council would give fair consideration for using a good portion of this one-time windfall as an addition to our reserves against, you know, a situation like we've had to encounter this past year.
Thank you. And then lastly, last but not least, the last slide. Just general budget comments. Some of them I would like to thank Commission Member Alsner. I did want to point out the almost $500,000 for the city paying its own water bill. So I'm glad he brought that to your attention. Other general comments are, as you're aware, our major revenue sources were not as severely impacted as originally estimated. And we really do have Measure A and the UT measure being approved as being just instrumental in not seeing a severe deficit this fiscal year, along with departments tightening their belts. There's a total of 8 positions, citywide, that were, we use a term in the city, if they were kept frozen, meaning they weren't filled, they were kept frozen. We didn't refill the position. When you don't fill a position, then you have the salary benefits of not paying the salary and benefits. You have the cost savings of not paying the salary and benefits for that position. But you also have an impact on service levels because that person isn't doing what they normally would do. So these unfilled positions also had a significant impact in helping to balance the budget. But as the city manager's budget message indicates, this is probably not a sustainable way to operate, especially if the stay-at-home orders are lifted. I can't imagine, you know, South Pasadenaans being, you know, happy in a city where there are no recreational programs, for example, or the library isn't open to the public. They have their drop-off service, but just these services that we've come to know and love. So the next budget, we'll take a look. I don't know. We're always watching to see what the latest orders are from the federal and state government. So at this point, it'll be an interesting process putting the next budget together, anticipating whether or not things are going to be completely opened again or modified somehow. But we'll do the best we can to figure out what we need for our resources for the new fiscal year. But the city manager did want to emphasize that the way we've operated this last year for obvious reasons just isn't sustainable if we want to continue to receive the services that you're used to receiving. That concludes our staff presentation. Again, I said it was at a high level. At this point, I'd be glad to answer any detailed questions. We do have Albert and Armina here with us. We have Albert he prepared last year's budget, so historical information. He's a good resource. Unfortunately, further back than that, you know, you have new staff here, so It'll be a little hard to go a little further back, but we're all here. Staff is here. We're pleased to present this and we look forward to your review and your comments.
Thank you for your presentation. Very good.
So I have a question on page 9. You have estimated fund reserves. And then on page 14, there's a general fund designated reserve. I see that one of the differences is that the Arroyo Golf Course is in there in that second on page 14. What is the difference between those two things?
Okay, thank you for that. This is a GASB, governmental accounting requirement. In the olden days, any city reserves, the total amount, whatever the amount was, could just sit there in reserves. There's a requirement that the city council actually have designated reserves and undesignated reserves. So what you're looking at on page 14 it is reserves. It's regular general fund reserves money, but the city council has designated them to sort of be set aside for a special purpose.
Right.
So you have, whenever you look at a city's general fund reserves, there's a designated amount, which means it's general fund money reserves, but it's been designated for a specific purpose that's stated. And then you have your undesignated reserves.
So, but the other numbers are all the same on page 9. Everything's the same except the Arroyo.
Where are you looking at? Okay,
I
you
think
might
it's just a
have a
typo.
typographical, you might have just caught a typographical error. Those two charts should match.
Okay,
So
so there's a
That's
typo.
yes, those two charts should be identical. Thank you, Commissioner Wood.
I had a question regarding the insurance fund, 1.15 million of settlements. So I saw on the news that there was something like a 450,000 settlement for the Vanessa case. What is the rest regarded to? And I thought we had some type of pooled insurance to cover our settlements such that we're not just paying the full amount out every time we settle something.
We have, I'm going from memory, I want to say, and Albert can correct me, I believe it's $100,000. Anything above that, we do get some reimbursement. The problem is the way the city's insurance works is, I'll give you the $450,000 settlement as an example. We had to pay that whole amount out. Then the insurance company will reimburse us the amount over the retention. So we have to show all the expenditures in the expenditure line item, and then all of the revenues are on the revenue side of the budget. So to know the true cost, you'd have to net those two together.
So is there an offsetting number for this 1.15 million that's on page 62, the insurance fund?
Yes, I can show you at this point in time, it's our conservative estimate. And if you go to general fund revenues, it's towards the back. It says insurance. Albert can pull it up, probably. It's towards the end of the general fund list. There's actually a line item where you can see the revenue coming in. There you go. Thank you. We're estimating $370,000 at this point coming back to us.
Okay, so I mean, we're still out like $700,000. So
that line item includes our general liability, our workers' comp, and think of it, the 450,000 actual judgments. Those three things are lumped together in that line item.
I know, but I'm just comparing it to prior years, right? So if you look at what the insurance fund standstill usually is every year, the increase is.
No, this year I was speaking to our HR manager is the one who administers this program and this line item. And as Albert will tell you, because he's the one who needs to transfer the money into the account to pay for these costs. This year, we are seeing a higher than unusual year. We've had 3 judgments ongoing just since I've been here, since September, 3 judgment amounts. Our workers' comp and our liability is also running a little higher. And when you think about it, if you have a lot of smaller, since we're paying the first 100,000, you can have a lot of those and never get any reimbursement for them because you didn't on that one. You have to be, each claim has to exceed the retention. So if it stays under that retention, we don't receive any money back. It's and every year it just depends on the experience, workers' comp, liability, and then the judgments. And this year we're just being hit with higher than usual costs.
Are you guys allocating for the Allison Smith case in this as well then? Or is that something we can expect in future years if it comes
that judgment has not been issued yet.
Okay, right, that's what I'm saying. So that's not you guys are not pre-allocating anything.
Correct.
So this is just on judgments that's happened.
Right, based on judgments that happened for the judgment portion of that number. And then we have the workers' comp portion that we do estimate what the workers' comp is going to cost us for the whole year.
Okay.
That is an estimate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at prior years and it's always been, let's call it around $200,000, maybe 300 on a high year. So I mean, this is quite a bit more.
Yes, it is.
And then also on the expense side, planning and building doubled year on year?
Yes. Planning and building, this is a very similar situation to what we're talking about insurance. For planning and building, in November, the planning department went to the city council because they had a huge backlog of planning projects. And so they went to the city council, and I want to say it was a $600,000 to $700,000 contract. That's a reimbursable contract. So the city's going to receive reimbursement for the contract cost. Also explain it a simpler way. Homeowner, you're going to do something, you go in and you pay a deposit of $25,000. This contractor we've hired is going to process your plans. The city's going to get a bill. You're going to get to build your project. The way the city needs, again, to account for that is all of the expenditures have to go on the expenditure line item. So because they added this $600,000 off the top of my head, additional expense, that goes in on top of their regular expenses, but the revenues come in under the planning revenues. So again, you would net those two. Those two should always equal each other. Sometimes there's a timing issue because they might not finish till another fiscal year or something, but technically speaking, those two numbers will net each other, but it does inflate the budget number because we have to show the expenditures on the expenditure side and the revenues on the revenue side.
Okay, but let's go to page 36 of the proposed budget.
Mm-hmm.
Where on the revenue side, and also, I mean, 600, the difference is 1.5 million, right? So 600,000 is a piece of that, but again, like the insurance, it's less than half of that.
Right, and they're not going to get, it's in there. You know, I actually put it in the city. I think the numbers are in the city managers. Hold on.
Because I can't tell any revenue category that has a $600,000 bump.
Well, because we've always had somewhat of a, it's not going to be a whole, it's not going to be a full 600 because we always have the department operates with a lot of deposits, but Albert can go to the planning department, planning fees. All of the planning fees, public works fees, planning fees. Right there, just planning. You will see they go from 256 up to 800.
Okay, so this is in which revenue item now?
Planning fees, right there.
So I guess I was just looking at the summary. So on page 36, where you break it down to property tax, assessment, UT franchise fees, license and permit is actually down year on year, fines and forfeitures, etc. So
it falls under the current services. Current services actually dropped in other areas like community service and library, and that's why it looks like it's fairly flat, but most of it is coming from planning.
Okay, so we got a $500,000 bump. So what's the other million plus expense in planning?
I'm
Or
trying to-
million?
Hold on, let's go to planning. You're on page in planning department, I'm going to planning. Because if you look at their line item detail, you'll be able to see which lines are up. Oh, you know what? A lot of it is due to finishing up the general plan. Let's go to, the best thing to do is to turn to their page in the budget and go line item by line item. They start, Albert, on page 154. That's the best place to go, is page 154. You can see, just look at wages and benefits. They're up, they're about flat. If you compare to adopted budget in 2020, they're about flat, $1 million and $1 million, give or take a few. So it's not there. But if you go through their line items, you will see that their professional services is up and their contract services are up. Professional services, there's a lot of money in there with pertain, and you can read the details. That's where the narratives come in handy to see what's in the 666 and what's in the 1.1. That'll be described in the narrative. But I know that the professional services, there is some remaining general plan related costs in there, which aren't reimbursable. We don't get any of that money back. It just costs us to finish to prepare the general plan. And it's the contract services number where the deposit based programs are residing. Does that make more sense?
Sure. And then I guess the other one, and I'm just literally just going and seeing which items have big jumps, is what was it? Just what got lumped into non-department overhead for the $600,000 increase?
Almost $500,000 is the one that Commissioner Elsner brought to our attention for paying our water bill.
Oh, so okay, so that was for paying water.
Showing it in a more we did it last year, but we did it through I call it behind the scenes transfer. Instead, we're putting it as a line item in the budget for transparency purposes.
Okay, that's just the city's own water, right? Basically.
That's water used by the parks, right? Parks, the city hall, maintenance yard are just city facilities, city owned property.
Okay. And then just for my curiosity, and the account number 237, there's some state gas tax for $800,000. What is that?
Which page are you on? It helps if you give us a page.
It's those separate accounts. Number 237. What page? Page 25, I think.
25?
25.
Yeah, there's numbers. We put numbers on the bottom for you, even though we don't have a table of contents yet, because it's so much fun flipping through these.
I know, it's exciting.
Page 25.
What page of the PDF are we talking about? In the PDF viewer, there are page numbers up there too.
Yeah, page 25 of the link that we were sent. And it says page 25 on the PDF. Yeah, this just
And it has revenue.
right there, state gas tax. What is, just for my curiosity?
That is actually,
SB1.
what was that?
What is SB1?
It's money that we receive from the state that has to be used for the streets. It's a revenue.
So this is money in that we're getting from the states.
Correct. This is a revenue. Correct.
Interesting. All right. I think that's all I had. And I want to echo Gary's thought about that 4 million. I don't know the details of how or why we decided to take the lump sum. It does make sense if we're worried that, you know, technology might change, our terms might change in the future. I don't know how long this term was and the financials behind that, but it seems like we have a large unfunded liability still on the pension side that we need to deal with in the future. Maybe put it towards that. Though it does not seem like you know, given the conservative nature that we're forced to invest in, we would necessarily have gotten higher returns than the discount rate that the vendor probably discounted when paying us the net present value of that stream of cash flow. But let's just see what we can do with that.
Yeah, and I'll send you the staff report just so you have the background information. The deal is done. We signed contracts and agreements, and we received the revenue. But one of the things in your upcoming agenda, speaking about pensions and post-employment benefits, on page 8, we actually do of the city manager's transmittal letter, we actually do identify what our outstanding pension, the unfunded liability is. And one of the items on your work plan is actually to look at pre-funding, a trust fund, who knows what, but looking at the options that are available to reduce the city's expenses in this area. So that's on your work plan for a future meeting.
Elaine, you got the staff report on that one as well,
Thank
on
you.
the venture towers.
Okay.
Elaine, I just wanted to kind of chime in, and a lot of the questions that Zen had, I had too. And I really want to compliment you and staff, because the narratives for these accounts, there's a lot of little details that if you're not looking for them, you wouldn't really notice. But for instance, on page 75 of the PDF, the insurance fund, let me see. Okay, sorry. It's actually page 63 of the budget. Yeah, there we go. So there's a little note after settlements where it said revenues representing insurance reimbursements are revenue account, 5425000. So that kind of language I hadn't seen in previous budgets, but that kind of explanation was really helpful, because you see like, wow, that's a big dollar amount that we're moving from the reserve fund into the insurance fund. And if that note wasn't there, it wouldn't really jump out at you that maybe we're going to get a reimbursement or an offset of that. So there were a number of instances where I found some really helpful, narratives in these account descriptions that were able, to answer some of my questions. And I think just overall for anyone who's reading the budget, this particular draft budget is really good at sort of explaining, what's going on in a way that I haven't seen in previous years' budgets. So I really want to thank you and congratulate you for that attention to detail, because it makes the budget document easier to read and follow. And I think there were some similar notations in the planning department about, increased expenditures were offset by increased planning fees. So those little kind of signposts are super helpful. I had a couple of questions about actually one other line item, and this was in the water production, and this is on page 145 of the budget. And near the bottom, account 8152, pumping power. It looked like there was a pretty decent spike from one year to the next in pumping power. And the narrative for that on page 147 describes this as an account for electrical and energy charges associated with operating well and booster pumps. So I'm wondering if you had any kind of, more detail about what might explain that kind of spike from last year to this year.
It's a combination of factors. One of them is an increased cost in electricity. The other factor is the pump being down. It's interesting. Cities that have water departments, I retired from a city that had one, so I know this for a fact. Their biggest electrical user is the water department, because they need to pump that water from the ground, up. So they are always the biggest electrical user by far of all the other departments. So it's an increase in the rates, and it's also when the well was under construction, it wasn't being used. So now it's back and running. It's been running for a while now. I don't know the exact number of months it was down, but it is running full bore again. In fact, one of the line items I need to correct has to do with carbonated active carbon things they need for the well. So it is entirely a reflection of the pumps up and running. and an increase in electrical costs, just Edison charges more.
I did have a question about the granular activated carbon. Is that kind of like an ongoing maintenance thing, or was that a one-time purchase? Do you know anything more about that?
It is an ongoing maintenance thing, and a similar situation where we didn't have to buy as much as usual because the well was being under construction. Now that it's up and running, we are being, in one fiscal year, we're having, I believe it's 2 major purchases of this material hitting both in this fiscal year. I don't know, because I haven't looked forward to see if it's going to continue to need to buy this twice a year or if it'll go back to once a year. But this year we were hit with 2 purchases in one fiscal year, and it had to do with the well being up and running again.
Sort of a bigger picture question on community services. Do we know whether there's a chance that like Camp Med and the recreation classes are going to be back in more of a normal pre-pandemic type of format this year, or has there been any discussion about that?
There hasn't been any discussion about that yet. That's one of the things when we go to the city council in April, we'll have a discussion and try to figure out, predict the future as best we can. But at this point in time, we've not had any discussion. I know we're hoping to be a lot more open come July 1st. I just don't know how much more. I'll be able to give you more information at a future meeting.
And my last question, which is sort of we were here almost a year ago at the first draft of this budget, and I'm just wondering, there was some talk about, possible financial repercussions if we didn't have a budget. Do you know whether we're good on that right now on the timeline that we are? Have we suffered any kind of penalties or anything like that for having a late budget?
I wasn't here a year ago, so I don't know what they were referring to. I really can't answer that one, not being here a year ago. I'm not aware of any severe financial impact from not having one. I know we're going to have a really ugly, nasty audit finding when they do this year, so be prepared for that, commissioners and public. Because it's highly unusual not to have a budget approved by July 1st. And I know the auditors are going to make it a big finding, and hopefully it's a one and done finding and it won't happen ever again. But financial, I can't think, I don't know what they were thinking when that statement was made. So I really can't, I can't give you any insight into that because I don't know, but I'm not aware of any. Long way to say I'm not aware of any.
That's good. That's all I wanted to know. I just want to make sure that we, didn't have any serious consequences from the delay. And also just one kind of final comment here. There was a lot of work that you and staff did on the CAFR for 2019, and I know how hard you worked. And there was a lot of attention to the balances in the various funds, the reserve funds, the special revenue funds. And I just wanted, for other people who may be listening to this to express that the confidence level that I have in those balances and in the audited numbers, I have a really high confidence in that, and I really want to thank you for the hours and the attention to detail and fixing issues with the spreadsheets and really coming up with a budget that has good numbers that will be a good foundation for financial reporting in future years. So you see all these numbers and they if they don't mean a lot if you're don't like looking at budgets, but for me, having participated in the commission and the ad hoc committee and working with staff on this, and the project that you assigned to the committee, I really want to thank you for coming up with a really solid budget with reliable numbers that we can all be happy with. And so, thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much. I just have
I'll
to
echo that. I feel like we definitely feel a lot more relaxed about the finances this year.
We only have to look through the lack of public comment to verify that.
Well, I just have to, you just let me thank, I really want to thank Armina and Albert.
Yes.
You have a great team in the finance.
Yes,
department.
yes.
They're working, really hard to make sure that we can get things on a good track going forward, and working hard to get caught up, stay caught up. I also, we don't talk about Marcy Medina very much. She's the interim finance director behind the scenes working with the audit. She has been just a wonderful resource with her finance director background or technical accounting background to help us make these improvements that you're seeing. So it's a team effort. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? We have a motion to submit this to City Council, the fiscal year budget 2021 for approval.
I'll move to submit the budget, the draft budget, and recommend approval by City Council.
I'll second.
Okay. Take a roll call here. Ed Elsner,
Aye.
Ellen Wood,
Aye.
Zen Tao,
Aye.
Gary Pia.
I don't have a vote on this.
That's correct. Okay. And I approve it.
Edwin,
We get Edwin.
Edwin, I'm sorry, Edwin Choi. I knew I missed somebody. You're mute.
Thank you, commissioners. The next item on your agenda, this was something that I learned was supposed to be on January, but we're putting it on March, is time to select a chair and vice chair for the next calendar year. The way this is normally done is we take nominations from the floor for the position of chair first, and then you would vote, and whoever gets 3 or more yeses gets to become your chair for the next year. And then the second, then we do the same process for the selection of your vice chair. So I don't know if anybody would like to nominate anybody at this point.
or volunteer.
Or volunteer. Mhm.
I mean, Fred, do you want to do it again?
I'd be happy to.
That is allowable. So are there any other nominations?
Yeah, I mean, I'll nominate Ed Elsner if you're interested, if you want to take a turn.
I'd be interested, definitely. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to get into a big competition here with Fred, but you know,
We're all very friendly. It'll just rotate around.
Those are all the nominations. Are both nominees interested in the position?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Since
Can I just back up? I'm going to second the motion to nominate Ed Elsner.
okay,
Thank you, Fred.
very good.
Well, Ed,
All those,
congratulations.
yes, all those in favor of Ed, please say aye.
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 Are
Aye.
there any opposed? Okay, so
Thank you.
Chair Elsner, you may now open nominations for vice chair.
All right. Do I hear any nominations for vice chair of the Finance Commission? May I make a nomination?
Sure can.
I'd like to nominate Edwin Choi for that. If he's willing.
I'll second it.
All right, Edwin.
Okay, are there any other nominations? All those in favor of Commissioner Choi as vice chair, say aye.
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 Are any opposed? No. Thank you. We now have a new chair and vice chair.
Thank
Well,
you.
Congratulations.
All right. thank you.
Congratulations, everyone. The number 3 was just put on your agenda as a standing item. We don't need to discuss it. The ad hoc committee has not met because staff has been a little bit tied up with budgets and audits. They will be meeting the end of this month of March, as you will also be meeting again, if that's okay, the end of March. So there is no item for 3. It's a standing item, and you will have that item on your next agenda. I did want to give you a preview. There was one on your work plan to review our water bonds for possible refinancing. I did speak with our treasurer, Pia, about this item. I did reach out to our bond counsel. They are preparing some preliminary numbers to see whether or not it's financially feasible to refinance our bonds at this point in time. And I hope to have that back from them to make your March meeting. And then the next item is your fiscal sustainability report update. Again, that was supposed to be on your January agenda. February, we're meeting today instead. So I will put that also on your next March agenda so we can get things back on schedule and on track and to you on time. And that concludes those reports. So just more for updates to let you know that staff hasn't forgotten about them and when they're coming back to you.
I have a question, please. So when would that be? Would that be the 24th of March?
We were planning whatever your regular normal meeting date is in March. I don't know what it is offhand unless somebody else does. Let's see.
Wait, I think it's
The fourth week, Thursday of the fourth week?
Is it the 4th or the
20.
3rd week?
Fourth week.
4th week. So yeah, 24th.
Mm-hmm.
Or 25th?
25th. isn't it?
I'm sorry, 25th.
And if it's okay, I mean, we can skip since you're meeting now. I just, if I do believe we will be able to do this, your regular meeting date in March. If you want to wait till April, that's fine with staff too. But I assume you want to be March.
I'd like to do it on the 25th.
Okay, not a problem.
I will not be here on the 25th.
Any objections on that?
No,
Okay.
we're around.
Elaine, I've got a quick question for you. Did bond counsel give us any estimate on when they might be able to return an opinion to us?
They said 2 weeks, and I spoke to them last week. So
Okay.
I'm expecting something next week at the latest. If I don't hear from them, I will call them back. Since it's on the agenda, very preliminarily, the gut reaction, I can't remember that you gave me his name, Treasurer Pia. I did call the gentleman you had me call. One of the bonds is really relatively new, recent, and one of them is still less than 10 years old. He did think there may be, generally bonds have 10 years where they don't want you to refinance them, but you can. But what happens is and we'll come back with details, the bonds lose, if you refinance them too soon, they lose their tax exemption. But he says, even if they lose their tax exemption, it still might be a marketable bond because of interest rates. So he was going to put that analysis together. So the basic question is, it is too soon to refinance and maintain the tax exemption that government bonds usually have. It might make them taxable, but he was going to return with the detailed information and the numbers so we could take a closer look. That was just his gut feeling off the top of his head based upon when we last refinanced these bonds and how old they were.
So it sounds like we may be getting their opinion in time to present to the commission at the next meeting, the 25th.
Mm-hmm.
That would be good.
Okay.
And you're talking about taxable for the investor of the bond?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
So they would not be very happy about that.
Probably
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
So that's why it'll be interesting to see
Okay.
what comes back.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's all
Okay,
part of the feasibility study.
right.
Next
And
item, sorry.
Yeah, and it'll be preliminary information. And then once the commission reviews it, if it looks like it's something that's worth following up on, then we'll take it to the city council and they're the ones who will authorize us to actually proceed with what's necessary to refinance them. So they wanted your initial review of the matter before it went to them. Mr. Chair, we're ready for the last item on the agenda.
The approval of the minutes. Has everyone reviewed the minutes for the meeting on January the 24th or 28th? I'm sorry. Is there a motion to approve them?
So move.
Okay, second.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
I
Aye.
think that was
Aye.
fair.
Opposed?
Um,
Motion passed.
well, hold on.
Yes. Sin?
Did I miss that meeting? I was there at the meeting, no?
Yes, you were.
I think you were not at the last meeting.
She might have joined like a few minutes later or
I
something.
think she joined late. I think
Oh, yeah, it may
she
have
was
been
there.
like today where I may have missed roll call, so.
Yeah, you joined, you were in a conference call. I remember you talking to us.
That's right. That's right. You did join late at the last, you were there. Okay.
Any closing comments from anyone? Councilmember Donovan, Jack?
I'd like to share what happened at the council meeting last night. After, I would say, not too much discussion, the council did approve 7 patios, and I briefly, 7 patios is the project on El Centro. I would think that you all probably know about it, but if you don't, it involves, I think, 56 condos and 3 houses, plus about 6,700 square feet of businesses on the bottom floor, and the other and 2 floors above it for residential use. That was approved 5-0, and the planning commission had a lot to do with that going through. And I've only been on the council for 3 months, but I've seen what the planning commission has done with that project in 3 months, and I don't know what happened before that. They did a great job. I mean, it was, as a new council member, it was really good to see the council depending upon the commission's input in making that decision. And all the questions were addressed by the commission to the developer, and project passed 5-0. I can't say I agree with it 100%, but that was it, Ellen.
Yeah, was it approved without any affordable housing?
It was approved without the affordable housing because when the developer went to the planning commission, 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, with the original plans, affordable housing was not put in it at that time. As well as the mission project, coming
That's
up.
what I thought. Okay.
And I
Is
don't
this
think,
gonna count towards our RENA for this upcoming cycle?
pardon me, Zen?
Do you know if this is gonna account to our upcoming RENA requirement?
No, it's not. It won't affect at all, and neither will the mission project. I'm jumping ahead here, but both projects went through the planning commission without any consideration towards RENA requirements. And when they first started, it was before RENA was such a big issue. Okay, now as here I am, why should we bring it up at this meeting? But you asked. It'll be much more difficult in the future to get any project through the city council without RENA. And I can't speak for the planning commission, but my assumption is that the same thing would apply there, because they will know what's going to happen when it gets to this council. So, or any council, I shouldn't say that. Any council at this point has to give a serious consideration to RENA numbers, whether they like them or not. Right now, they're the numbers we have to deal with. So, and any other questions on that before I go to one more thing? All right. Second thing would be, there was a proposal from the South Pasadena and the Chamber of Commerce that came up first in December for $45,000. Came from the South Pasadena originally, and came to the council for promote the businesses in South Pasadena. The council didn't particularly like the way it was presented in December. It was voted down. Well, it was voted down, but I shouldn't say voted down. I don't even remember if we took a vote, but we sent it back to to the Pasadena and to the Chamber of Commerce to work together, come up with a proposal, bring it back in January. We'll take a look at it, take another vote. Wasn't ready in January, wasn't ready in February. Was ready last night, but we didn't think so. So we did not approve it, and we sent it back again for the two parties to work, I call them parties, two entities to work together. The one thing everybody agreed on is we want to help the businesses in the city. Okay, and it's just what's the best way to do it. So it was sent back to the two parties to come up with an agreement with. You're gonna do like any contract. You're gonna do this and say it. You get paid. You don't. You don't. At any rate, I volunteered to be on the ad hoc committee for that, along with John Primus. And we actually have the first meeting Saturday, and we'll have another meeting on Tuesday. And I'm on the council with four attorneys. So I like to think of myself as the rational voice in the council. And I think we'll be able to, the reasonable vote. We'll be able to persuade the parties to come up with an agreement. And if, I don't want to go back and go into if they don't. That's we will anyway. We're sitting down with one party. Then we're sitting down with the other party on Tuesday. We'll do our best to get them together, and hopefully a couple of days before the council meeting, we'll have a solid agreement. So, and that's it. That's it for I was thinking of new news to bring to this commission. I'm new to it. I'm quite impressed. There's so much work you cover. And I'm glad I couldn't get my mute button quick enough. It was something I was going to comment on. And then when I got to my mute button, I realized, no, Jack, you don't know. And it was brought up in the council. I said, you don't know really enough about this to speak for the council, so shut up. So I was lucky. Couldn't get to the mute button quick enough. Anyway, that's all I have to offer tonight. So
Thank you, Jack. Any other comments before we close? Enjoyed working with all of you this evening.
Yes.
Again, Elaine, you did an excellent job, as well as your staff there, Armani and there's Albert. Excellent job getting us caught up.
Yeah.
And we do appreciate all the hard work that you've done. Thank you.
Very welcome. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
All right, this meeting's adjourned. Good
I
night.
appreciate it. You've done a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks.